Good evening, fellow Badgers. Thank you for joining us tonight for the second episode of our event series, The Business Of, where we feature alumni working in the business side of your favorite things. My name is Natalie Singer, and I work on the alumni relations team at the Wisconsin School of Business, and I'm excited to be hosting The Business of Chocolate tonight. I think you're in for a really great treat, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers. First, I would like to welcome Mike Forbes. Mike is currently the CEO at Alter Eco Foods, a company selling chocolates at national retailers such as Whole Foods and Kroger, with a focus on sustainability and activism through food. Prior to joining Alter Eco, Mike had a history of working with food products, spending several years at California Olive Ranch and General Mills. So thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Next, I'd like to introduce Amy Jo Bedoni, owner and master chocolatier at Valenza Chocolatier, where she crafts Italian-inspired artisan chocolates and confections in Costa Mesa, California. Amy Jo left her career in corporate real estate to study chocolate and start her business, and in 2019 was named an International Rising Star at the Academy of Chocolate in London. So welcome, Amy Jo.
Good to be here.
All right, so to start off, you both have kind of different, perspectives in the chocolate industry based on your roles. So if you could give us a little bit more sense on those companies. Mike, if you want to start off, can you tell us about Alter Eco and why you decided to join their company?
That's great. I joined Alter Eco about 3 years ago because I was really excited about the mission. And what we're really about is we are a sustainability company, and we're about making things better for people and planet. And chocolate is just a really delicious and fun way to do that. And so a couple of examples of things we do. We are organic. There's no soy. It's a really clean label product. We actually pay farmers more than more than the market wage for their product. Because again, there's a lot of problems in the chocolate industry in terms of making sure people are paid adequately. We practice a lot of regenerative agriculture, which is another way that's makes the chocolate better for people and planet. And we're a leader in recyclable and compostable packaging. So if you ever try our truffles, you can see those at like Whole Foods or Willie Creek Co-op. The wrapper to the truffle is actually made out of tree bark, and it composts in your backyard in about 90 days.
That's really cool. Thanks, Mike. And Amy Jo, how did you decide, I know you have a pretty interesting background, but how did you decide to become a master chocolatier and start your company?
Well, good. Well, like many of you, cancer has touched my family, and my cousin had passed of ovarian cancer at the end of 2008, and it pretty much rocked my world, losing a peer that way. And, I think if I have to say, she kind of gave me the gift of to step back and be like, you only get one shot in this life, and you better find your passion. And if you can make it into your career, do it, because you can't live with regret. So after doing a lot of soul searching and having the guts to leave my, pretty successful corporate job, I went back to school out of a program out of Canada. It's called Eco Chocolat. It's an online professional chocolate program versus pastry school, because pastry they only study about 2 weeks at most in chocolate. So I went back to school and became a professional chocolatier, and then did a bunch of internships throughout the US and abroad. And then I launched Valenza Chocolatier. So Valenza is my maiden name, and it's all Italian-inspired artisan chocolates and confections. And then I did my master parts of my training in Italy. So yeah, and I launched in the beginning of 2013.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Amy Jo. All right, so before we jump into questions that we got from the audience, I want to make sure that our audience understands, what is the process of chocolate? So if you guys could give us just a little quick overview of how it gets in the hands of consumers in the first place. How does it go from farm to store? I'll start, Mike, if you want to start off with that.
Yeah, we were talking backstage and thought it'd be really cool to just start with, the bean to bar journey. And so most cacao is grown almost all of it's grown in the tropics. They call it the cacao bowl. We source from Ecuador, Peru, and the Dominican Republic. On the left, you see these little pods low on the tree. That's a cacao tree. And those pods basically are like a kabocha squash, about that size and length. And on the right, you can see that's one of our cacao farms. And it looks a lot different than what you might think a regular farm looks like. You can see the cacao tree there on the right. but there's also banana trees and mango trees and garden crops like pigeon peas and peppers, and then there's trees for lumber. And this is a setup called regenerative agriculture. And we grow our cacao this way because it makes better cacao, but also because it's better for the farmer. They make more money. They're actually happier working in this environment. They're working in a live forest. Once they get it set up, it's actually easier to work. The forest sort of takes care of itself. And there's a whole bunch of benefits to the soil in terms of soil retention, or sorry, water retention, biodiversity, more microbes in the soil. It's just we think it's a better way to farm. So that's where our chocolate comes from. And then on the next page, I'll show you what the actual cacao bean looks like and where it goes from. This is the far left is not the most attractive picture, but that is just like when you scoop out a squash, you scoop out a cacao pod, and there are these little beans, and they're surrounded by slime is a technical term, but it's sort of a little viscous substance. So then the next step is they're fermented, and what you see on the bottom is a fermenting box, and that is my hand when I was in Ecuador. If you stick your hand in, when the cacao ferments, it actually generates its own heat. And so when you stick your hand in there, it's about 20 degrees warmer than it is outside as the flavors are released, and that's how the cacao kind of gets its magic. Then the chocolate is dried, and you can see a drying bed here, and it's bagged up and moved into where we do refining and conching and roasting and all that stuff to turn it into chocolate.
That's awesome. And Amy Jo, I know you kind of deal with more of the back end of things. So can you talk about, the end process of the chocolate?
Yeah, so we kind of, in our history in chocolate, am I echoing a little? We basically have two different types. You have the bean to bar maker and then the chocolatier. So I'm basically sourcing chocolate that's already made. So I currently source from Venezuela and the Dominican Republic. And I, like Mike, it's very important to me to look at the practices of the farms. My chocolate's actually made in those locations, so it's already gone through the chocolate making process, and then it's sold at a fair trade price back to the farmers. So they're all in a co-op. So I look at that as, a part of my business as well. But so what I do is I'm sourcing the actual chocolate, and, just like wine and grapes, it takes on, the environment that it's grown in. So if it's by banana trees or different fruit trees, or if it's like in Peru, if it has more volcanic activity, dirt, the dirt has a different flavor, it's going to take that. So the flavor profile of the chocolate is really what I'm looking at, because I want to know how that's going to work with the flavors that I'm making different bonbons, bars, and confections. So as Mike said, so here I have some beans here. I don't know if you can kind of see them. There's actually 4 types of beans, quality, and then they do hybrids of those. So what's kind of sold on your commodity market, and Mike, feel free to pipe in here too. That's kind of your lower quality bean, like what our mass produced chocolate is made out of. So for Mike and I, we're looking at that kind of 5% rare fine chocolate, those rare beans, the higher quality beans, to then make into chocolate. So when you break the beans, it has like a skin on it that goes through a blower. And then the inside is what we call like the nib. Okay, so if you're ever, in a health food store and you see cacao nibs, people put them in their smoothies, etc. So that's kind of the next thing. It's kind of that break up it. And so as Mike was saying, the crunch, there's a whole process to take that and make it into chocolate. I have the cocoa butter, the fat. So really the art of my job is the tempering of the chocolate. So like if you've ever made at Christmas time, the holidays, and you go to dip, your different cookies that you make, or strawberries, etc., and you get all that white snowflakey look on your chocolate when it cools, that means that you didn't temper it correctly. There's actually like 5 beta crystals, and that's kind of the art of my job, to make sure it has that shine on it and that snap. So I got the cocoa butter here. This is the lower quality cocoa butter, is actually what lipstick is made out of. So just a little tidbit. And so white chocolate is actually made out of the cocoa butter. And then you've got the milk chocolate, which milk can range from the low 20% up to even like the mid 50%. And then the rest is sugar. and some other things that we won't get into. That's a whole other conversation of what people put in their chocolate, which can be good and bad. And then the dark is up to 100%. So I'm really looking at the flavor profile of what the chocolate maker has made to then remelt, temper, and then make into different bonbons, bars, and confections.
That's really interesting, and I think really good foundation for kind of some of the other questions we had from our guests. So we did ask everyone to submit questions in advance, and we received so many great responses. So thank you to everyone who did send in questions. We won't get to every one of them, but I hope we do answer most of your questions. So one of the major themes that we saw in those questions was people asking about the farming and fair trade practices. And I know you both have talked about that. It's critically important to both of your companies. So can you talk a little bit more about how you ensure that your products are really sustainably sourced and fairly sourced, and what challenges you kind of get from doing that? Start with you, Mike.
It's a great question, and it's really important in the chocolate industry. I'm sure many of you have read, there's a Netflix documentary on issues in cacao with actually child slavery. There's big issues around living income and how much farmers are paid for the chocolate. It's a hard way to make a living. There's a couple of things that Alter Eco does, and one is we do rely heavily on certifications. Everything we source is fair trade. Everything we do is organic. But we've also found beyond that there really is nothing beats the power of relationships. And so we've worked with our farmers in Ecuador since 2012, the Unocaste Co-op, and we entirely work with cooperatives. We've worked with our folks in Peru, Acapagro, for the same amount of time, and we just added, as we've grown, a new co-op in Dominican Republic a couple of years ago. And so especially before COVID, we would visit those farms regularly. We do our own audits. We have long-term relationships with them and actually fund projects. So we will, through our own work and fair trade premiums, fund healthcare initiatives, schools. We have a foundation that helps people implement regenerative agriculture on their farms. So there's a lot of things we do to build really, really deep relationships that go beyond just the transaction of buying and selling the chocolate. And what we found is that improves the farmer's livelihood, and that also helps us, and that we know we're getting a really steady source of great product.
Yeah, and I would say, very similar to Mike, obviously, since I'm not the actual chocolate maker, I think what I struggle in my industry from the chocolatier aspect is everybody's looking at their bottom line, right? Because you're making a bonbon that, can sell anywhere from $2 to $4, depending on where your market is. And it's all about your margins, right? So if it takes 2 to 3 days to make, all the labor, for that, your ingredients, XYZ, if you're selling at wholesale versus retail, where is your bottom line profit on that one piece of chocolate? And so what I find in my industry is I think people tend to look at it as the chocolate might not be the number one ingredient. And they're really looking at what their profit margin on that piece is, especially when they go to mass produce it. And I look at it as a different way, is the success of my product is based on the chocolate that I'm sourcing, because that really is the main ingredient. So for me, I'm willing to pay more, establish a relationship with my chocolate makers. Again, the certifications, see how they audit themselves for that, and adapt, and actually not go through the more bigger food distributors, and actually go to the source of their actual US-based distributor. So that's kind of how I've chosen. I try to stay loyal to one brand. It's kind of caught me in the, I've created my own bottleneck, as we call it, since I've been sourcing through Venezuela. And obviously with the political climate in Venezuela, the co-op has been in existence for over 100 years, and it's been trying to be taken over so many times by their local government. But, they're exporting, through Colombia. It's like contraband, right? And so I've gotten to the point where I did have to start sourcing some other chocolate. So for me, I feel the chocolate's the most important, and that the farmers are getting paid for what it's worth. And I, as a chocolatier, can't take credit for that chocolate. Like, people are like, oh, you win these awards, all these things. But it's really, I have no problem giving the credit to the farmer and working with them and sharing my success with them. Because at the end of the day, I can go and taste 5 different chocolatiers and I could tell what chocolate they're using, because it's the lowest price per point. It has the same aftertaste, and that's not what I want. I'm trying to create an experience for somebody, and somebody's going to pay for that experience if they're going to have that moment where they can step back and be like, eyes roll back. They have the OMG moment. Like, that's what I'm striving for. That they're going to spend that money and take that time, and then they understand me, they understand my product, and then they understand the chocolate. So, I think in a prior life I should have been a bean to bar maker, coming from Wisconsin and my farming. I love that part of it. But yeah, it's a different. We look at it a little bit differently than Mike does, but from again, I just reiterate that the chocolate's the most important part of it.
That's great. And, I think the next question is, somewhat similar. Mike talked about COVID and how you can't get to the farms quite as easily now and things like that. And Amy Jo about different political climates. So obviously sourcing is also just a challenge right now with supply chains and things from 2020. So, how has the pandemic changed your business, and how do you think that those things might stick around long term?
It's a great question. We've had several waves of kind of COVID experiences. And I would say for us, actually, the first one, and I think many of you remember this, 14 months ago, suddenly all of your grocery store shelves were empty. And we saw that and we were ready for the orders. And actually, we didn't get many orders for a few weeks. And then we learned we were kind of panicking, like, oh no, what's going to happen? And it turns out, most of our retail partners were prioritizing like sanitizer and toilet paper and like absolute essentials. But then the business started moving again and it took off. And what we're finding is people are really wanting like comfort and maybe a little bit of nostalgia. Like our nostalgic flavors are doing better. And sort of more indulgent things, but some people still like the health, so our high cacao is doing well too. Our business segments are going in different directions. Like, so we had a big register business where you would buy, like, if for those of you in Madison at Willie Street Co-op, they have our truffles right by the register. That business got a lot softer because suddenly, people aren't going to the store as much anymore. They're doing Instacart, they're doing other online shopping, and if they are at a register, it's not like a treat me moment anymore. It's more like it feels like it's going through customs at an airport, especially back then. You just wanted to like not touch anything and get out safely and quickly. So our truffle business took a hit, but our bar business took off. Another thing that was hard for us is we served a lot of offices, and then suddenly we had a chocolate service to a lot of San Francisco offices. But when the pandemic hit, a lot of that slowed down, right? Because people weren't working anymore. For us, the pluses way outweighed the minuses. We had a lot of growth last year. Really, it was trying to keep up, but also recognizing that every part of the business is different than it was before. So especially when you get down to things like forecasting, like on a SKU level, it was really crazy. What we found on the supply chain level, interestingly, is 2021 has actually been harder than 2020. We had a lot of inventory. We planned ahead, and we're ready to kind of navigate COVID. I think what we are still working through is port delays. Things, at least in the Port of Oakland, where we bring our things in, 6 to 8 week delays are not uncommon. And in these, things happen file last week. I don't know if you've read about this, but one of the cargo ship that caught fire 50 miles off the Port of Oakland, and that happened to have a whole bunch of our chocolate on it. And while that isn't pandemic related per se, you could argue it might be because they're working these cargo ships a lot harder than they used to be. And that's just yet another challenge we've got to deal with and think about backup plans. And what we have found is having backup plans to everything is key to an environment like that.
And I think for me, I don't sell wholesale. So I made that choice in the beginning of my business that for the margins that I wanted based on the ingredients and the profiles that I was going for and the type of brand that I wanted, is that I chose not to do wholesale. So for me, I grew my business basically in kind of like two different segments. I have a corporate segment, which is obviously where I came from, your corporate gifting events, client events, etc. To then the direct business, which is all the holiday stuff. So your Thanksgiving, I don't do Halloween. That's, again, we're talking fine chocolate. So, like, I don't do stuff. I always tease, I'm like not a tchotchke chocolatier. I have a very specific brand. But then the holidays, Valentine's Day, Easter, etc. So, before COVID, I always got the question of like, well, where's your retail store? Don't you have a retail store? And like people defined my success. They were trying to define my success for me, and like assuming like, well, if you don't have a retail store, then you're not successful. And I went into this like, I need to control my fixed expenses, and I need to keep my fixed expenses low. And living in Orange County, where retail rents, I mean, let's just say Fashion Island is our staple, glamorous mall, right? You could be paying 40, 50, up to $75 a foot for, just a tiny, and not even a great location within the mall. Or if you have high foot traffic in some of these others, they're like 10 to 15 bucks a foot. Well, there's no chocolatier that has really lasted except for C's, which is more of a corporate. So I chose to do a commercial kitchen and actually have it more of a boutique that I make to order. I don't carry inventory, so I don't have a lot of loss, and I would just grow it or pretty much organically. So now fast forward to COVID, I look like a genius, right? I don't have a retail store. I'm in an industrial building. You can just pull up. I run out, curbside pickup. I already have an online platform. So like I already had customers trained on how to order, so I could just keep going, right? Well, then like Mike said, I walk into the grocery store, no toilet paper, no this, no the empty shelf, and I'm like, my chocolate is not an essential good. Like people are trying to survive. And how am I going to start like, hey, you need to buy your chocolate this week? Like, I'm not using the pandemic. I kind of had this mental thing in my head of like, this is not essential. Like people don't need to buy their, almost $4 turtle, right? Like they need to go get their toilet paper, right? But then Easter hit, was the first main holiday, and people were like, no, Amy Jo, you're the only thing that's a tradition in our family. Like, we still need our chocolate. Like, you need to get your butt in there and start going, And so, like, I had to kind of flip that mentally, because obviously the corporate side had dried up, but I still had this whole, direct business, which, like Mike said, I mean, I could have worked, I had, I was up in every holiday between 20% or more, even though I couldn't have my seasonal employees because I couldn't get COVID. So 2020 actually turned out better than I thought. Physically and mentally, it was super tough, but from a numbers standpoint. But I have to agree with Mike. 2021 has been nothing but like, from packaging to dry ingredients. I mean, I get a lot of my ingredients from Italy. So I had a backup plan for that, because once, everything, when Italy was, going through such a rough time, they couldn't be in the farms harvesting their hazelnuts, etc. So, I mean, I had backup plans and things are starting to come back. But I mean, yesterday I just got an email, my chocolate is going up $2 a pound because the price of fuel. I know, right? I was like, that's a lot,
Yeah.
And then, for the price of fuel, all of the shipping costs have all gone up. You can't cardboard is like boxes is just like, everyone's hoarding it because they're afraid come the holidays that there's going to be a total packaging shortage, and then on top of it, your fees are going up. Like everything is it just feels like small business. It's like it got hit so bad in 2020, but now it's the reality of like, I don't want to have to increase my prices to my customers because they got me through this, you know, and they are loyal. And I know like I can here and there, but I go back to the business model that I created, and it's making me sustainable, because when you're selling wholesale, you have to be able to do mass scale. And I am an artisan small business. Like, I'm me and maybe, you know, 5 seasonal people. And that's the niche that I want. I don't want to compromise. I don't use additives or preservatives. There's a short shelf life on my product. So these are very specific decisions that I make that you got to get, like Mike said, you got to have your plan A, B, and C, and you got to be nimble. You got to adjust. You got to think on the fly. You got to have backup plans, and you got to communicate to your customers. I mean, you know, it's no different. It's just in a different way. And I have to say, like, through COVID, I mean, I know in our area, Mike, I'm sure you're the same way. Everybody had a desire to shop local. Like, they wanted to find those local producers and purchase from them, and they sought it. And it, like I'm so blessed in my community and the people that, like, I'm just so blessed, and I'm so thankful that I'm still standing after all of that, you know. But moral of the story is I'm never gonna have a retail location.
And just to echo what Amy Jo said, I think for all of us in 2020, if you survived, like, that's a success, right? That's a win, and you sort of redefine from a business perspective what your objectives really are. Other thing you mentioned that I think is worth is, you know, we're seeing that too, and maybe a lot of you are in your businesses too. The inflation in fuel and shipping and things like that is very real, and I think there's going to be a bit of a long tail from COVID in terms of how those things work out. And for us, it's even availability of trucks. You know, we ship in reefer or refrigerated trucks because, you know, chocolate is temperature sensitive, and you know, there are some, like a long route, if we need to ship something to Florida, there are a lot of refrigerated truckers right now who don't even want to do that route because they would much rather, they can get paid really well to stay local. And would you rather drive a local route, or, you know, cross country and be in hotels every night? Right now, probably something local. So there's a whole bunch of things like that that are happening that are really interesting. And, you know, I think have yet to fully work their way through.
Yeah, I think we all wish that 2021 would come and it would just all be different and it would be better. But yeah, I think everyone kind of sees there's still some repercussions coming. So kind of speaking of changes that you're doing, we also have a lot of questions around, you know, changing trends and changing tastes and how that affects your business. Anything from, you know, flavor interests to wanting different dietary needs or lifestyle choices. So how do you kind of navigate deciding what product offerings you might want to sell in your company, or, you know, do you try to go with those trends or try to stick with what you know? I just love to hear your perspectives on that.
It's a great, you know, it's kind of the fundamental question we think about a lot as a business, especially in the world of wholesale and grocery and natural, or we Alter Eco operates. You know, the consumer comes to the shelf or they're online and they make a decision in a split second. And you really have very limited space to kind of talk to them and educate them about why you're special. And so, you know, something we really think about is you can't do too much. Our consumer loves, you know, we call them our brand fan. They love us because we are a sustainable chocolate company, and they know we're taking care of the farmers, and they know the packaging's good, and they know the product is tasty and it's clean. And that is the thing that really our loyalists love. And so we try to stick to that as much as we can. And let's say when we launch a new product, we try to think about how can we do this in what we call the most Alter Eco way possible. And so when we launched a line of milk chocolate last year, because we did mostly dark chocolate and weren't doing any milk, we said, geez, like, what's a good Alter Eco take on milk chocolate? And we did a grass-fed bar, and the milk is from grass-fed cows. And so, you know, we thought through that. Okay, it's clean. There's no, you know, there's a lot of benefits to grass-fed milk, and we actually like that farming system and supporting that. And, you know, then we had to build the supplier relationships, and we actually flew to the farms to like meet the cows and ensure that they were actually outside on pasture and weren't over pastured and things like that. So That's how we look at trying to think about new products and incorporating those trends. Now, that said, we also have to think in wholesale, like shelf space is very limited. And especially in chocolate, there's a huge fight for that space. And it's not only other, I would say, more artisan chocolates like ourselves, but Hershey and Mars, like really, really $15 billion. So, we have to pay attention to and I call them more like tribal diets, because now how people are eating, I think personally, I'm sort of a Michael Pollan, eat real food, not too much, mostly this kind of person. But there's a lot of folks, like the keto diet is huge right now. Just go to Google Trends and type in keto, off the charts. Paleo is pretty similar. And so once in a while, we will launch a product that's more keto friendly or paleo friendly. We launched some keto bombs, which are like our kind of a truffle format, but it's filled with nut butter and there's no sugar in it. We did that this year because we knew we needed to appeal to that crowd and also protect our shelf space a little bit. And so that's been a really fun one to do. But as we do it, then we have to think through, how do we do it in a way that really fits with our brand? Because if we're trying to say too many things at once in a really crowded environment, we end up saying nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very good point. So for me, again, going back to my brand, Italian-inspired artisan chocolates and confections, that is my lane, and I need to stay in that lane. So when I look, I kind of separate trends versus dietary needs are two different categories. So let's talk about trends. So for me, trends, I don't follow trends because trends come and go. And usually the trend is not something Italian. So for example, you had, for a while, there was bacon, everything had bacon in it, bacon bits and chocolate covered bacon and bacon, or tea infused. Every different type of tea was being infused in cream to make different ganaches for bonbons. So I completely stay away from them, right or wrong. But, again, mine either has an Italian ingredient, it's old family recipes, it's things I've learned in Italy. There's a story behind everything I do. And, like Mike said, is like, you only have a certain wheelhouse. Like, you can't be making, 30 different flavors. And especially for me being an artisan, I can't offer that all the time. Like, it's just not cost effective or efficient in production. So I have a seasonal menu, and it rotates, per each pretty much holiday and season. And it's very specific. They're very specific pieces. There's a story behind them. I'm creating an experience. I love it when I get these emails of like, oh my gosh, I just had your limoncello bonbon. And it reminded me of a time when, I had this one soldier. He was like, I was in Afghanistan, and I had this Italian soldier with me, and he taught me how to make limoncello from scratch. And when I had that limoncello bonbon, it took me back to, blah, blah, in Afghanistan. And, like, I get these emails that just like, that's what fuels me, right? There's a story behind it. I'm creating an experience. When you're tasting it, it's taking you back to somewhere. Or if you've never been able to go to Italy and you just imagine, like, this is what it would taste like. Very specific, okay? So I can't dilute that. And it causes me to say no a lot. I get phone calls like, will you do this? Will you create a recipe for this? No, because the last thing I want to do is when I've got my, high-end retailers, all of a sudden they taste something and it's like not in my wheelhouse, and they're like, wait, Amy, what, Valenza Chocolatier made this? Like, it's confusion, right? There's a place for everybody. So that's kind of on a trend standpoint. However, from the dietary, so I don't use, like, sometimes you see on a package all the different buzzwords, like I said, like, you're standing in line and you see a bar and it says raw, vegan, natural, organic, keto, like they put it all out there on the front of that label. And it's just like so confusing. And at the end of the day, you're just like, is it really all these things? Are these just buzzwords? Like, and so for me, I'm not marketing myself as a dietary product, okay? However, in every seasonal collection, I will have things that don't have dairy. So I do a stuffed fig with an almond and organic lemon peel dipped in a 74% dark. And, that it's vegan. So I'll have them all labeled so that when you go on my website, you can filter and pull all the vegan products. I'll do a water-based ganache. I have different chocolates that don't have soy, using sunflower lecithin instead. So I will accommodate to everybody because I want to create that experience again and it shouldn't matter if you eat vegan or eat paleo or eat keto, because all of them, it's basically you're looking at it and being like, oh, I want to try this, and it just happens to be XYZ. But what's more important is I'm not using, and so for example, like my bonbons have a 3 to 4 week shelf life. My truffles have like about a week and a half because I'm not using any additives or preservatives. So for example, like I trained with the head chocolatier for research and development for Godiva like 7 years ago. And he was in charge of creating a new artisan line for Godiva because their artisan line got so mass produced that they lost kind of the niche of having these like delicate, bonbons or pralines, I think they refer to them, and truffles. But he still had an 18 to 24 month shelf life because they're shipping all over the world. So it's like, so that's all I'll get like, oh my gosh, this is so fresh. This is so this. It's because I literally made it last week and I don't have any additives or preservatives. So, I'm kind of trying to, use organic creams and butters and trying to make it as pure as possible to create that experience. And then I will have, meet those, dietary, things you can go and filter. But I'm not going to advertise that I have a paleo friendly or a keto friendly product because again, I'm considering myself as a high-end fine chocolate, a chocolatier. So
one thing that has been really interesting to me is this low sugar trend and how folks will, I've been in the food business for 20 years and there's always sort of like taste is king or taste is queen, and it really needs to be delicious. And I think that is true in many ways, but I've seen some of these folks on various diets that they will sacrifice taste if it's got the health benefit they're looking for. And right now we launched a 100% cacao bar. It's called Total Blackout, and it is not our best tasting bar. It is like a quadruple IPA. It is very dense. There is no sweetness. We cannot keep it in stock because there's this group of folks, and it's not a huge group, but they are looking for no sugar. They don't want, inulin or stevia or those sorts of things. And when they find it, they will buy 6 of them and, just eat a square a night. So that's been a really interesting thing for me to see. And just that even, the rules of the game are changing a little bit, and it's different than what it might've been 10 years ago.
Yeah, and talking about sugar, I think sugar gets a little bit bad rap too because you can have a 90% bar and that 10% is sugar, and they're like, no, we can't eat that. And I'm like,
right?
but you understand if that was agave in there, that's worse for you than the unrefined 10% that's in there. Like it's just like a conditioning thing, and it's like for me at least, I'm face to face on the with my customer to educate. Where like for you don't have that option. You've got that stuck it on the shore stealth packaging. How you aren't there to explain it to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I am hungry listening to you talk about your products. I am sure that all of our viewers are too. So to wrap it up with our last question, what has been your all-time favorite chocolate experience?
Oh, that's a great question. Mine is actually related to the farmers. Last October, 2 Octobers ago, I went down to Ecuador to work with the co-op and work in a regenerative agriculture system. And this gave me so much respect and awe for, the hard work that goes into making an agricultural product, and chocolate at the end of the day is an agricultural product. So we went and one of the things they do in regenerative agriculture is you actually have to be really regular at trimming the tree leaves and branches in the upper story, so sunlight gets through the canopy into the cacao trees. And so, boom, I get there and they give me a machete, and these people just start cutting. And what I learned is I'm not very good at using a machete. There's this probably 75-year-old Ecuadorian grandma that was just lapping me, right? And just cutting everything down and doing it perfectly. And I was still on my first branch and sweating. And, they were kind of laughing at me with good reason. But it got me really close to just how the product is made and where it's from, and just gave me a ton of respect for the craft of farming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I probably have two experiences that are equally, high in that experience category. I would say the first is, so as I said from the beginning, I left my corporate, career in commercial real estate finance and banking. And, if somebody would have told me when I graduated, from Madison, that I was going to leave this, awesome career that I created. And, one, I was going to move to California. I just never thought that was going to happen. But, leave my career and, be an entrepreneur and launch a chocolate business. I would have been yeah, right. I never would have dreamed this. So fast forward, 2 years after I had launched my business, my old boss had ordered some chocolate. And so I thought, I'm going to deliver it, right? I'm going to go back, because all my old, colleagues are living vicariously, through me. So I go into the office, and so I give him his order, and he proceeds to, try it, right in front of me, no pressure, right? But I'm confident, I know it's good. If you're not confident in your product, then you should be making it, right? So he takes a bite of it was my tartaruga, turtle in Italian, turtle's trademarked, FYI. And his, he does the eyes roll back, oh my God, he gets silent, he gets giddy, he's got this smile on his face. And I worked for the man for 6 years, and I never got that reaction out of anything I've ever done. As hard as I worked for this man, and here he is drooling over this turtle in a matter of seconds, and there was so much joy in that I was I don't even care if this business fails. That was a moment, drop the mic, right? So that's the first one. But the second one was a personal, me tasting. So when I did my master's training throughout the northern region of Italy, Italy's really known for their gianduja, which is a hazelnut. Have you ever had Nutella? Nutella is a derivative of gianduja. And it dates back to the Napoleon, era. So we're at this, it's Guido Gambino, and he's his main his first location, as well as his plant, or his facility, is in Torino. And he's the Willy Wonka of chocolate. He's 2 generations. He wins the they call it the Golden John Viotti, award every year. It's 150-year-old recipe, blah, blah, blah. And so he is literally, so we're back in this lounge, and it's all this wooden walls and bookcases, and we're on these leather couches, and it's just so screaming romance, and just everything's chocolate, right? And here he's coming with platters from different chocolate drinks to affogatos to all his different bonbons. And he's just feeding this to us and explaining it to us. And it was an hour of pure heaven. And I'll never forget it. And then we had to bring him something. And so Italians really don't make caramel. And everything is very smaller. The bonbons are half the size. I mean, if you travel through Europe, everything's up, US, everything's bigger, right? And so I handed him my turtle, and he looked at my turtle, and he was just ah! It's so big, but it was just a fantastic experience that I'll never be able to replicate. So
that is awesome. Well, it looks like a lot of people in our audience also are really getting a sweet tooth from this talk. did drop the links for both of your companies into the chat if anyone's interested in checking out both of their companies. We hope you do. But thank you, Amy, Joe, and Mike, for joining us. It was a great program, and we really appreciate you coming and sharing that with us.
Well, obviously, on Wisconsin, everybody.
Thank you. On Wisconsin.
Yeah, thank you, guys. And thank you all in the audience for joining us tonight, too. We really hope you enjoyed yourself. We will be returning to the Business Of series this fall, so stay tuned and watch your emails or the Wisconsin School of Business social media accounts for some more information on those coming in fall. So have a wonderful evening, and on Wisconsin.